Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Legal Legends Podcast. I'm your host, Rudy Rodriguez Shoma, and I am the Vice President of Strategic Partnership for Synergy, handling lien and medical bill resolution in all throughout South Florida. I have with me today a legal legend. He's not an elderly man. He is a young man, but his impact in the legal field has been legendary already. I mean, some of the largest verdicts, 35 million, 27 million, huge verdicts in injury cases for clients. He's been featured in articles, publications, presentations. I mean, he presents, he's the president right now of the Broward County Trial Lawyers Association. I have Michael Hersh, co-founder and owner of Hersh Kurtman Injury Law. Welcome aboard, Michael. Thank you so much for joining me.
Appreciate it, Rudy. Thanks for having me on.
Am I a good intro guy?
You're a good intro. It's very awkward for me. I got to tell you, I'd be happy to hear all that about somebody else, not me.
It's funny. I was talking to Abel Vadia earlier this week, and he says, I need to have you tell my wife this introduction.
Yeah, that's right. At home with my wife and my kids, I could use this, but outside of that, it's totally awkward. I'm happy to introduce somebody else, but I appreciate it, Rudy. Thank you.
So, Michael, I appreciate you coming on, man. We've known each other for a number of years. You're currently the president of the Broward County Trial Lawyers Association, for which we are a sponsor of. But your road didn't start today. What is your road to where we are now? I mean, schooling, when you decided you wanted to be an attorney, what made you choose this path? Because I know initially you went into corporate law at Greenberg Traurig out of school. So how did we end up here? Floor is yours.
The floor is mine. I mean, how do we start? I grew up down in South Florida. We had talked just a moment ago that I was dead set on I'm out. I'm leaving Florida. I'm going to go up north. I'm going to play in the snow. Went to school up in Philly. Found out that city winters are horrendous, and I was dead set on coming back down to Florida. But I didn't want to be a lawyer initially. I actually wanted to be. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I thought I might have wanted to be a doctor because in high school I was like one of those. I was like a sick kid that loved dissecting things. So I remember in bio AP, I was the kid like you didn't have to dissect anything. The teachers felt for you, and it was just me back there, and I was dissecting frog, cat, fish, everything. I thought it was the coolest thing. I was like, I'm going to be a doctor, obviously. And then I got to college, and I realized that people who want to be doctors really want to be doctors, and I wanted to have a good time. So I was like, I guess I'm not going to be a doctor. And so the truth is, I figured I'd go to law school thinking it would just open doors. I wasn't one of these people that was like, I'm set on, I got to be a lawyer. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to get an education to open doors and give me opportunities. And my thought initially was go into business, go into real estate. I wanted to be back down in Florida. The real estate market here in many years can be good. People do well with it. And that was my intent. So you mentioned corporate law. I ended up at Greenberg Traurig out of Florida law. I was fortunate enough to get opportunities at a firm like that, and went there intent on doing something that would allow me to get into business. And the truth is, when I came out of law school, the market had tanked. There were no opportunities in transactional work. And so the firm told me, they think I'd be a good fit for litigation. I was happy to talk to people. And ultimately they're probably right. I really would rather not sit in an office and just stare at paper and not interact with folks. So I went there and started litigating. And I did business litigation for a lot of years. And I eventually found that what I was doing, I didn't think was that exciting. I was really just helping one deep pocket put money into another deep pocket, and that was not rewarding to me. I did a lot of work for life insurance companies, banks, and I wanted so desperately to get into court. Like, once you're going to put me in litigation, get me in court. And firms like Greenberg Traurig it's hard to get into the courtroom, right? It's a lot
Mhm.
of research and writing, and so I found my way into some cases where it was the foreclosure crisis down here. Greenberg and some of the other similar firms were taking from banks these complicated foreclosure cases where what I would call the foreclosure mills were messing things up. And so they needed young folks to who were aggressive and willing to get in front of a judge, which a lot of attorneys at the bigger firms don't want to do that. They needed some young folks to go take care of it. And so I said, give me like 100 cases. I'll do the big complicated work. And then on the side, I'll handle all these smaller foreclosures. And in that, I got a lot of experience in the courtroom. I got to try some cases. Granted, there were no jury, it wasn't jury trials, but I was trying some of those cases. And one thing I found was I always felt bad for the people I was going against, the little folk. And I was getting so angry all the time at my clients who I thought weren't stepping up and doing right by people who really were just in a bad way for no fault of their own.
Mhm.
And so I came around to thinking, I got to help. I got to be working for people, and the cases will be more fun. Working with people will be more enjoyable. It'll be more rewarding. And so that's a long story as to how I figured I got to get out of corporate law and I got to start working for on the plaintiff side, which is what ended up happening in 2013. Made the switch.
So I actually worked in foreclosure, and I worked at one of those foreclosure mills
There
that
you go.
would hand over cases to Ackerman and Greenberg
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Because yeah, we would handle thousands and thousands of these things, and I know that there were attorneys that made mistakes and
Well,
and
so
problems that arose and stuff
I'm
like that.
Rudy. I'm not even knocking the firms. The firms were overwhelmed. I mean, some
Oh,
of
they
those
were
they
completely
were
overwhelmed.
overwhelmed with work. You had attorneys that weren't really trained and experienced to do what they were doing, and there were mistakes made
Hmm.
from the law firms, but there were also a lot of
Yeah.
mistakes made from the banks.
Oh
But
my God. Yes. Yes.
Rudy, I had one like pivotal. There was one, like there's moments in life when you're like, I gotta make a change, right? It could be like I need to start exercising, or I need to eat healthier, whatever. I have those moments where I need to eat healthy like almost every day, and by nighttime I move off of it. I'm back to eating healthy. But I had a case for a bank where there was an elderly couple who had owned this house, and in the nonsense that was going on down in Miami when the market was flying, they were the victims of one of these fraudulent schemes where a small company would come in, tell them that they're going to refinance and get them some money, and they have the homeowner sign a bunch of paperwork, and unbeknownst to the homeowner, they sign away title, they lose the house, and they're essentially renting it back to some company. So and in this couple, the wife was on her deathbed. She was on the way out, very sick, and this was like a nice, really nice guy, older guy, he's from Cuba, like salt of the earth guy, so nice. And I took his deposition because the defense attorney had all sorts of crap that they're filing, and I had to go deal with it. So I ended up deposing the husband well, he thought he owned the house, and he was being thrown out of the home, and
Hmm.
the company's getting foreclosed on. And in the deposition, I realized he actually had no idea that he didn't own the house. He didn't know that payments weren't being made. He thought he was giving money to his company, and they were paying the bank for him as like an intermediary, which they of course weren't doing. And whatever bank it was, right? Call it Bank of America, even though it wasn't Bank of
Yeah.
America. At some point, I said to him, because I think there was a counterclaim his attorney filed. And I was like, do you know that do you have any qualms with the bank? Call it BOA. And he was like, no, they're the best bank ever. I love my bank. And I was like, do you know you're suing the bank? And he was like, no, I would never sue the bank. And in that moment, I realized, like, one, his attorney was an asshole, right? His attorney was doing what a lot of the foreclosure defense attorneys were doing, which they're just filing stuff to delay. He
Yeah.
had a real defense in the case, and this guy missed it. And it was like that moment where I was like, all right, I'm switching. Like, I got to help this guy.
Yeah.
Granted, I didn't want to do foreclosure work. So anyway,
Yeah. No, it wasn't fun.
yeah.
No, it wasn't fun. And I remember being in that field, and you're hearing stories, and the people that swindle these folks that have homes typically it's someone who's Haitian takes advantage of some older Haitians, or someone who's Cuban takes some advantage of someone who's Cuban, like an older Cuban who's doesn't know any better. And it's generally, from what I've seen, people of immigrant backgrounds who are being taken advantage of by people that are younger in their own culture. Like
Yeah,
I would see it constantly with these things myself, and you're sitting here like, damn.
yeah,
And the bank doesn't care. They want their money.
they
They
want their
want
money.
even though this thing was a complete scam. And then you talk about those defense attorneys. They weren't. They were just being paid a monthly fee of $300 to $500 a month with
Yeah,
thousands of clients, and they're just paper pushing. They were
yeah.
never actually litigating. They were just paper pushing to delay, keeping the house as long as possible because most of the people were getting these
Well,
arm rate loans that at 0%, and then all of a sudden 5 years it explodes, and you're like, well, what do I do? Well, you knew what was going to happen,
the thing,
you
the
know.
thing that one of the things that bothered me was, the banks. Not to get too into the banking
Yeah,
situation, but the banks, right? They would set up these like what the refinance, like they refinance the loans, right? They cut
yeah.
deals, loan modifications, and whatnot. And what I found, what would happen is they would work with the borrower to modify the loan and try to help keep them in the
Hmm.
house. But then they would set up these like impossible obstacles in terms of
Yeah,
paperwork you need, and so it never would come to fruition. And so one thing that bothered me, right? Like a lot of PI attorneys, right? So I know you're doing that. You're talking to
yeah.
plaintiffs for attorneys. I'm assuming some of the other folks do have, because we're talking about some background where something in their life like made them equipped for plaintiffs work, right? Maybe they
Yeah,
were bullied, right? And so they got a thing against the powerful. Maybe they
yeah.
dealt with law enforcement and they got an issue with that power. I didn't have that, right? I didn't know what I was going to do, but what I did find, my path once I got to law school was my first summer. I worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I was like a summer associate there.
Hmm.
And one of my biggest takeaways um, was the government is so powerful, right? Like if they want to accuse you of something, you are fucked. Like you got a major problem, right? And which goes back to what you just experienced on the jury, right? Like if at the end of the day, if the government has something on you,
Hmm.
they it starts with a grand jury. You're not there, your attorney's not there. That grand jury is going to listen. Most federal grand juries ultimately agree with what the prosecutor says, and they've got all the power. And so that whole summer was interesting, but it was wild how powerful the government is. And then I went and worked at Greenberg second summer, and I was representing all these big companies. And the truth is, when it's big company against big company, it's that deep pocket to a deep pocket that I didn't care for.
Yeah.
But some of those cases, it's you realize how powerful businesses can be, insurance companies can be. And so it took kind of my work. It was in work that I realized like I don't want to be on that side of things. I'd rather fight that power.
So how did you end up? I mean, you go from Greenberg Traurig to Kelly Ustall. I mean, that's a completely different animal.
Yes.
Like you're in a different that you're in a totally different field. This is like we're starting over from first grade.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, so I went to Kelly Ustall,
mhm.
2013. It definitely is. You're resetting, right? Like I didn't do any. I wasn't doing defense work when I got to Kelly Ustall. Todd Falzone, amazing attorney, awesome guy. He has his opinions on defendants and their attorneys. And I remember the first time I met him, he was like, we're bringing in a defense attorney. And I was like, God, like I wasn't a defense attorney. I was like a business litigator. I
Yeah,
represented, the banks were plaintiffs. I was a plaintiff's attorney.
yeah,
But I knew from doing all that work that I wanted to go represent people. And I knew in representing people, I didn't want to do criminal defense. I had no background. I wanted to do plaintiff's work. I wanted to do injury work, products work. Like I thought it'd be fun. And I
mhm.
thought it would get me even closer to the courtroom, which at a Greenberg's hard to do. I randomly got a like a recruiter call, which I generally tried to avoid them because normally they're calling about like go to Ackerman or go to Holland and Knight, and I didn't want to do that. And I got a
Yeah,
call from someone who knew an AUSA, who I had done some work with when I was a clerk at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and so I was like, all right, I'll talk to you, right? I'm okay with that. And he said, there's this firm, Kelly Ustall, that's looking, and they're a plaintiff's firm. I know you want plaintiff's work. And so it really happened that way. A testament to how far away the big firms are from like the really interesting trials. I didn't even know who Kelly Ustall was when he called. And ultimately,
wow.
Kelly Ustall is one of the finest trial firms in Florida, and they were at that time. But when you're at those big firms representing big businesses and you're not doing defense work, you just don't come across those. So that's how I met Kelly Ustall, that firm. And John Ustall, I interviewed with like 6 times. I had so many questions for him. This was a big move. Like I was at a firm where I was going to make partner. I was in a good place. The folks at Greenberg Traurig were awesome. I liked the people I worked with. I did not have a bad experience there. Some people like when they just desperately want to get out of a big firm. I was happy, but I wanted to do different work and I wanted to represent people. And so John did everything he could. I remember the first interview, he asked me one question, which was, and it's a great question for anyone who's going to be interviewing people. First question was, why do you want to leave where you are? And my answer was, well, I don't want to leave where I am. You guys called me. I'm happy. And he didn't ask. There wasn't another question. That was the only question in the interview. The rest of the 6 meetings were just me asking him questions. And what was really cool about that is John's approach was, if someone wants to leave, you got to really find out why, because there's a lot of bad reasons why someone would want to leave. If you're constantly moving, can't get settled, not the right fit. Well, then the firm that's looking at you needs to make sure that whatever was wrong in that other scenario isn't going to be wrong at the new firm. Mm-hmm. But if you've got someone who doesn't want to leave, that means something's right? Like that person's in a good situation. They're obviously getting along well with the folks that they work with. They must work well within a team if there is a team. So I don't know, that answer worked, and the rest was history. I asked my questions and eventually I went. And I started off with, like you said, reset. I started off with no knowledge about what I was doing. Like I had to figure it out on my own.
Did you get sent there? Did you actually get sent there by a recruiter?
Yeah.
That's remarkable, actually, considering, because I was a recruiter for 2.5 years and I know exactly what you're talking about. It's very, very rare that a firm will take on someone that has absolutely no experience in that field and pay a fee on that.
Well, so let's be clear though. This was their recruiter. They were looking.
Internal recruiter. Okay.
Well, they used a company. They had a recruiter looking for folks. Okay. The company they hired and the recruiter they hired just happened to know who I was from this AUSA we knew.
Yeah.
And he called. And John did say, like, I was not the person they were looking for, right? Like they were looking for someone that had, years of experience doing plaintiff's work. But what he said was
your answer was what it did.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure it was the answer. I'm sure that helped a little bit. But what he said was he wasn't expecting someone from Greenberg, right, who's had some experience with research and writing. Like typically he'd be talking to, the folks he'd be talking to were from the PD or the state.
Yeah.
Which have their own skill set, right? They had a skill set I didn't get because they're in the court trying cases all the time. Mm-hmm. But John was working on, a small volume of cases that had, pretty significant legal issues that would come up. So he thought, well, wait, this could be an interesting risk, right? Let's take on someone who's got a lot of experience with research and writing. I was definitely wanted to be taking depositions and going to hearings and arguing and trying cases. So I was a little bit unique. My background was different. So he figured, like, all right, let's take a shot on this guy. Which was awesome. But I really didn't, at the end of the day, he told me that I was starting out from scratch. I wasn't. If you spend 6 years at a Greenberg Traurig, like you learn how to maneuver around a case. What I didn't know was, like the minutia in plaintiff's law, I obviously hadn't dealt with, right? One of the first cases I worked on was a TBI, traumatic brain injury case, with a guy that was on a bike. And I didn't know yet, what a neuropsychologist was. The client actually asked me. The client was like, well, wait, someone mentioned that I should see a neuropsychologist. I was like, sounds like a great idea. I couldn't agree more. But I don't know. I was always the type that my personality is I want to know as much as I can possibly know. It's probably my Achilles heel with trial is, in trial, there's so much information, right? You got a case that just has like an entire body of information, and you need to be able to pack it all in and determine the story you want to tell. And a lot of great trial attorneys are able to very quickly pick out the information that's important and let everything else go. And the problem with me is I want everything packed in, and it makes it harder to prep. It takes more time, and it makes it harder to create your concise story. And so I did pick it up, I think, quickly. I think Ustall would say that, right? I dug in. I was reading books. I wanted to work cases. I wanted to jump in and learn the law on the plaintiff side and figure out how best to work up these cases. And it worked. And it was a great opportunity to work on some really complicated stuff and get some big results and learn more than just your typical plaintiff's work, right? I did some bad faith work and issues getting around work comp, med mal. I got to work on all sorts of stuff, which was really cool.
As I mentioned, I did staffing, so it's impressive that you would have they saw past. Okay, he doesn't have the experience, but in this field, but you don't typically see people leave Ackerman, Greenberg Charg, Holland and Knight, one of the White and Case, one of these large, white shoes firms, and then move into PI. You don't see it, and because a lot of people don't. A lot of grad. I know a lot of. I always ask this question of people when they decide to at a law school to go become a public defender or a prosecutor. And in my brain, because I came from a father who was an attorney, it was like the last thing I would want to do, because if that ever happened, because I didn't just go to law school to make $35,000 a year type of thing. And people have a lot of student loan debt typically to pay. So the idea that you go to Greenberg, which is a top shelf firm, and you're going to make $200,000 typically walking in the door, 160, whatever it is, that's important to people. I mean, you're going to be I know a lot of people that end up in those situations are grinding 80-hour weeks, like no life for the first 2-3 years. I was told that by some attorneys when I was doing staffing, like, I got no life, man. I have a bag on the back of my door and I got to be ready to get it wherever they tell me to go, to go, like maybe on a plane to leave, to go fly somewhere. And I don't know if you ever had to deal with that, but it was one of those things where I asked that question, and because everyone wants to make $200,000 walking out of law school, and you made a call making that and probably more at this point to start back over, which is awesome. Yeah. And were you married yet when that happened? Did you have kids yet at that point?
Yeah, actually. So when I switched, I was married and we had our first kid on the way. My wife was pregnant at the time.
Yeah.
It was definitely scary, but the way I looked at it, Rudy, was I was making very good money. That's true. They come out of law school, these big firms, they offer a lot of money. I saw that. I thought, all right, I'll go to one of these big firms. Like I said, I wanted to get into real estate or business. And so this was the path to take.
Yeah.
But life's expensive. Money is important. Like, I'm not someone who's going to say that that's not correct. Hell, I'll get home tonight and see all 3 of my kids, and I'll realize I have a lot of work to do to take care of them. But the truth, but ultimately, you got to enjoy what you do, right? When I was at Greenberg, and I had gotten past. I mean, it was a grind. There was a lot of work, but I was ready to work. I was okay. Ultimately, I worked harder at Kelly Ustall than I did at Greenberg, and I work harder now at Hersh Kirkman than I did at Kelly Ustall, right? Like, I'm putting more time in. But I'm okay and happy to do the work as long as I'm enjoying it. And so what happened at Greenberg was the people were great. I had gotten past that grind of just like endless amount of hours, which there were a lot. I mean, in the beginning, it was wild. But I knew it was coming, and I was okay with it. I had gotten past that. I actually was like pretty well situated. I had my cases. I worked with people I liked. And I was happy to go backwards financially. Like, I did go backwards financially. I had to go backwards financially in an effort to get into an area I liked. And what happened is I looked around at the folks at Greenberg, and while the partners there made a phenomenal living, they're great attorneys, I didn't want to be them. Someone had told me at some point, wherever you are, look around and say, like, is this who I want to be, right? Like, my boss, is that who I want to be? And if the answer is no, you better start finding a way to get a different boss, because that's the path you may be on. So I didn't want to be the folks I was working for at Greenberg, even though I have a ton of respect for what they were doing and the what they were accomplishing as lawyers and what they were providing for themselves and their families. When I at a Kelly Ustall, I looked at the people I was working with and for, and I thought, all right, like they're accomplishing things that excite me, right? They're helping people, that excites me. And look, you can do well as a lawyer in the world of plaintiff's work, obviously. So my thought was, let me find a place that has good work that I would want to do, get me closer to the courtroom, and plug away at that, and I'll find a way to get back to where I was. That was just my approach.
No, for sure. So, I mean, you're at Kelly Ustall. I don't know if a lot of these cases were when you're at Kelly Ustall that you have on the website, or if they're current ones that you have now. But I mean, you have a $35 million jury verdict. I mean, $27 million, I guess, settlement for a child. I mean, when you look at these types of $23 million case for a brain injury, I'm reading your website, by the way. I don't have this memorized.
You
You know, like when you,
memorize, Rudy. Come on.
I should. It's a disgrace. I should be ashamed of myself. 8.75 med mal case. I mean, when you look at these types of results, is this what you envisioned when you made that decision? Like, I want to help people who are going through it, because these are catastrophic cases, naturally.
Yeah. Well, so look, Kelly Ustall, when I went there, I knew the firm worked on substantial cases, and I was lucky, right? I was situated within the firm, on a team that got to work on some of the largest and most complicated cases. And then my background, having come from a firm that did, intensive litigation that required a ton of research, a ton of writing, that allowed me to work on the cases that had the biggest issues going on. So I got an opportunity to work on, I forget which one. There's a case with the $35 million verdict. I think it was that one. That case had some major insurance issues in it. I mean, that case actually went on for like 6 years after, not 6 years, 3 or 4 years after the verdict and judgment, fighting with insurance companies. And I had learned the bad faith stuff, right? And I'm not a bad faith attorney. When we've got cases now where there's bad faith issues, I'll pull people in. But I learned how to handle the insurance companies, so that even at our current firm, right, at Hersh Kirkman, we get cases now where folks will say, all right, I got a $100,000 policy, and we don't have a judgment yet, but I think that they're doing something wrong, and I'll step in and be able to maneuver around handling the insurance company and being able to make sure that we hold them accountable for their good faith obligations, right? Like that's part of what I learned there. So I just was fortunate to have cases that, if worked properly, were really enormous cases. I mean, you mentioned the little girl, right? That case was languishing within the firm. It actually was in the pre-suit division.
I remember seeing this at Kelly Ustall with the defective pressure cooker.
Yes.
I remember this case that you guys had.
So that case was at the time the firm had a pre-suit division. And in the pre-suit division, it's mostly like auto cases, right? Smaller car crash and whatnot cases. And that firm, this case was just sitting in there. And one of the attorney that was running pre-suit came up to me and mentioned, by the way, we've got this case that has enormous injuries. There's a little girl who's lost portions of all 4 limbs, and she's horribly burned, and I'm not sure why it's sitting with me, and I don't know what to do with it. And that wasn't the first. That's happened. Tony came to me once with a traumatic brain injury case and was like, I got this case and it's a little odd and there's a bunch of defendants. And so I had a few opportunities where someone would come to me and say, all right, this is a weird case going on. You want to help out and whatnot. So the pressure cooker case initially got no one was paying attention to it. And I think it's because when you read the police report, this 3-year-old girl is being bathed by her grandmother in the sink about 6 inches away from the stove. And on the stove is a pressure cooker, a traditional one. So and so they blame the grandmother, and DCF got involved. And so when you look at it, it's like, all right, well, this seems crazy, right? Like how could this be the product's fault?
Yeah.
And I figured, all right, this girl needs help, right? This family needs help. And the first thing we did was I figured I'll just start learning, right? Like any products case, you got to learn about the product. And this is funny, right? I thought this was funny. So
this is your six years of Greenberg Traurig and research.
So So anyway, Rudy, I get this case. I don't use a pressure. I don't use traditional pressure cookers. So I don't know everything. I
Neither
had to
do
learn
I.
I have to learn how they work. I know that they're involved in terrorist events. They're like bombs. They scare me. They're frightening. It's a pressure cooker. It's a bomb. So that scares me. So I'm like, I got to figure this thing out. So Rudy, what initially happened was I talked to the family. I'm asking how it works. The grandmother's teaching me how this thing works. And she mentioned something about how the gaskets, the way the pressure cooker works, you got a lid, pot, and you got to seal it tight, right? Like what makes it different than just like a normal pot that you put a lid on? Well, everything comes out. You got to seal it. So there's a little rubber gasket that has to seal it shut. So now as things heat up, the heat and steam can't leave. So the pressure builds. She made a comment that she got a new gasket. So at this point, I'd learned plaintiff's work pretty well. And I was like, all right, there we go. With a products case, if there's a new thing you add to the product, you might have no case. So I got to figure out, what did she get? And so I went to the store that she bought the gasket at, and I figured I'm going to go buy all the gaskets that are there. I'm going to figure out like what they offer. So I walk in, and the humor in it is it was in an area of town that like people, it's mostly people who first language is Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. I guess I look like someone who doesn't speak Spanish because the minute I walked in, I went over to the pressure cooker area. The woman who owns the place walked up to me and was like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm here to buy some pressure cooker stuff." I don't know what I'm here to get some pressure cooker things. And she's like, pressure cookers are dangerous. You shouldn't use them. And I was like, oh, she's definitely stereotyping. She's thinking there's no way this guy uses a pressure cooker. And so I said, well, why are they so dangerous? And she said, well, if you use the wrong gasket, because the gaskets were in front, and she used as an example, she was like, that could create a scenario where the pressure could get too high and something bad could happen.
Wow. And
I was like, holy shit, there's a case against the store. Because I could see they didn't sell the gasket you needed for this cooker. So if the grandmother bought a gasket from this store, they got a problem. Mm-hmm. And within like a month, we got all the insurance, $1 million policy from the store. And that was when the rest of the folks in the office were like, wait, this case is real. Like, if there's a way to get money on this case, we got to keep digging. Wow. And then we went on for like 2 years fighting over the cooker itself, which was defective. And ultimately, we recovered $27 million total. I mean,
what was the defect? Can you say?
Yeah. So the cooker, any products case, right? If it's not a car, it's hard to buy like 20 cars. If you got a consumer product. So at our firm, at Hersh Kirkman, we will do consumer product cases. Auto defect, we're a little more cautious. But I just finished a pressure cooker case earlier this week on Monday. We had a mediation. So a critical thing is you got to figure out the product. So we ended up buying like 100 pressure cookers, and we got lucky because the cooker that was involved in the incident, that brand name wasn't selling anymore. So we ended up having to go find the same cooker made by the same like Chinese plant under different brand names. And what benefited us is by going to get other brand name cookers, but with the same design. That's how we ultimately realized that there were some things that were different, right? The design changed or the manufacturing changed. And the defense in the case focused solely on that it was a UL listed cooker, meaning that UL has testing requirements for all sorts of consumer products for safety purposes. Well, they're like, well, it's UL stamped, it's UL tested. But UL, just because you have UL doesn't mean that one was tested. In fact, a company can get a UL listing, right? Meaning I've complied, and they can then change things about about the product over time and continue to use it. So in digging through the UL stuff, in digging through all the other cookers, what we realized was it wasn't tested for UL, even though it was stamped, which meant, okay, the fact it didn't meet any testing. So let's do our own testing. And we realized we can open it with pressure inside. And the defect, Rudy, was ultimately this. The pressure cooker, like most, including the ones today, a lot of them have what's called this little pressure valve. So there's a little piece.
Yeah, the one that goes up and down, right?
Yeah, so with pressure, it pops up. And when it pops up, it'll go into a spot where it blocks the opening. So as long as there's pressure inside, this little piece stays up. The
Mm-hmm.
problem here was that the piece they used was meant for like a 5-quart cooker, not an 8-quart cooker. It was too small. So when it went up, it didn't go into the plate. It didn't go into place. It didn't actually block anything. So it was a meaningless piece, and you can open it up. And when we ultimately showed that, I think this defendant realized this is a real problem. Any jurors want to help this girl. But
So you spoke to her. You're not into social media, but man, you're like the pressure cooker lawyer now, man. You just did another
I had one other. We're doing some interesting stuff over here. I told you I don't like social media. I just don't like. It's like the last thing I think about. We had so funny. We had 3 cases, right? This will be my like plug, right? We had when I left my old firm to open this firm. Like one of the risks when you leave a firm like that is, will I be able to work on cases that are of the same complexity? And it's hard, right? There's a lot of plaintiffs' attorneys out there. You drive through Broward, there's like 15 billboards of all sorts of firms. I mean, it's competitive. But I don't know. I've met enough people. I did enough work, right? I got some results, and I try to be as attentive and caring to my clients as possible. And it has led to an opportunity to continue working on really complicated stuff. And so just in December, we settled like $7 million in cases.
Nice.
And it's been 2 months and we haven't posted anything about it. And my partner is like, Michael, come on. But I gotta tell you, it doesn't cross my mind, even though I have to do it. It's a weakness. We've got to be out there telling people what we're doing. And social media is a great way to do it.
I mean, heck, my wife, if you need someone, she's still at home with our baby. So, I mean, if you need someone to do it from home, I mean, she can definitely help you in that social media because she is when she's not at home now because of having a newborn baby, she is a marketing director. So and an expert on social media marketing. So if you need some,
Rudy, you all of a sudden became a little social media star. All of a sudden, the suit started looking cool, and I saw all sorts of things being posted.
I had to adjust. I had to teach myself like a podcast. I didn't know how to edit a video. Are you kidding? I started podcasting sports a year ago, and I'm like, you know what? I've always wanted to find a way to help market the people that I work with as an appreciation, but also, it's a marketing for myself, but also like an appreciation. You can like this. I'll chop this up into clips, and you can use this if you want to.
Yeah.
Completely up to you. But I had to teach myself how to use Canva, CapCut, Movavi. You name these. I have StreamYard that we're doing this on. I've had Riverside. These are different streaming services. I'm looking for other ones because I'm always trying to get better. I have a microphone over right here. I have bought 2 separate cameras. The one I just got, I mean, it is crystal clear. The comparison from the one I had initially, it's like I was in a black hole. And now the one I have now, it's so clear. The clarity is amazing. And so I'm just trying to evolve. And I had to teach myself all this stuff. Initially, it was my wife showed me how to use some of this stuff because I had no idea. Like Instagram, I was barely on Instagram. Barely. And now Twitter, X, I'm on it now more for the sports podcast. I don't do anything involving, legal on there. But it's like these things are self-taught. So when I hear people, a lot of folks, when I hear certain folks complain about situations, I'm like, I'm 47 years old. I'm teaching myself this stuff
you learn.
And you gotta learn. You gotta learn.
Rudy, what's happened with us is we are. Oh man, today's what's today? The 31st.
The 31st.
Rudy. So tomorrow would be the 3-year anniversary of our firm. So perfect timing for you and I.
Happy anniversary, because I am going to ask you about that as well. But go ahead.
I agree. So we're finishing up on a Friday the 3rd year. Me and you. Too bad Ian doesn't get to be a part of it. So when we started, I didn't have Instagram.
Well, if it was Ian and myself, it'd be an hour misery talk about the hurricane. So I mean,
you guys would have a hard time discussing that. So when we started, I know that look, all of a sudden marketing when we started the firm became way more of a focal point for me than it was before. I wasn't focused on that, right? I was at a firm where there was plenty of work. I was the managing partner, so I was doing administrative and management work, and I was working cases. And now, all of a sudden we started our own practice. We started with almost no cases. It was not a scenario where we left and all of a sudden, we have 50 cases to begin with. Wow. It was, let's start from scratch. I had some cases that my old firm and I worked on together because they were either my cases, a couple of med mal cases, but not much. And so I figured, all right, we got to get into social media. But I think one, it takes like a little bit of a personality to think about it, right? Like as we're going through the day, like I say, like with the cases, we get a good result. Like my immediate reaction is not, I need to blast it out. It's like, I'm excited with the client. If my client's
Yeah.
happy, I'm thrilled. Like that's what I think. But we've been fortunate that we've been really busy, and we have not organized the firm in a way that Ian and I, as the founders and the owners and the managers, we're totally involved in the cases, right? Like we work the cases. I know the clients well, and our success so far has been relationships with other attorneys, right? Doing work that others won't do, right? MedMail, not a lot of people do. Consumer products, a lot of people won't do. Even litigation, a lot of PI attorneys won't litigate.
Yeah.
So that, and then clients, and so at the moment we've been so busy that I've lost. I've lost the focus on learning the social media component. So I have been like, I got Canva early on. I was like, I'm going to learn Canva. I'm going to be a pro at this.
Mm-hmm.
And I still, when I go home, if I do have to cut some video, I just ask my 11-year-old daughter, and she does it in like 8 seconds. She got pissed at me actually early on because she said that she wants to be our chief marketing officer, our CMO, and be on our website. And I'm like, I'm not sure. You got to go through an interview process for that.
That's beautiful. I know. I mean, hey, I'm serious though. Yeah, if you need it, my wife,
I'm gonna have
she
to
might
talk
be
to
she might be available because you guys. I mean, we are in a world now where word of mouth is always the greatest thing. The referral is always the greatest thing. That will never change. But general social media marketing now is. I've watched in five. I've been at Synergy now for 5.5 years, and I have seen small solo personal injury law firms go from nothing or almost nothing to multi-million-dollar firms in 5 years. And it's largely, from what I'm seeing, social media based. It has to be because they're on social, and you probably know some of them, but they're on social constantly, and it works, especially
Yeah.
for the younger generation of people. It absolutely works, and
Rudy,
you
you know
know,
what I think? What I think? So obviously I got a lot of close friends, right, who do what I do.
yeah,
Some of them are heavily involved in social media. Um, yeah, I think what it definitely does is it absolutely helps with your brand. Like
absolutely,
it's branding. It makes you noticeable, right? It makes people, you're top of mind.
hmm
Um, which is really important, right? It's different. Like because I know there are some folks out there that are really heavily involved in social media, but they'll tell you like they're not getting calls because of social media. But I
yeah,
guarantee, like some of those attorneys out there that are calling saying, "Hey, co-counsel with me," they're thinking, "Oh, well, I saw a video," or they're just top of mind, and
yeah.
that's where I think it becomes so important.
I mean,
Um,
think about how many times. I mean, I can think of how many times I sent out a Mailchimp blast to law firms, or I posted something because I was not good in 2024 with social media when it came to synergy stuff. Like I needed to be. One, my wife was pregnant, a lot of stuff going on. I guess I got lazier, which is not good, but I noticed the drop off because I used to do videos twice a week or twice, 3 times, 4 times a month or whatever. I'd send it to all y'all in direct messages,
yeah,
and it might come across at some points as obnoxious, but you remember them. And when you have that lean, heck, we saw each other at the event. We talked about what we do more, and we went more in the weeds with it. And you're like, oh, okay. Like it sometimes it
yeah,
takes 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 conversations or touch points for people to see or like I have a case I need worked on. Like I got a case today with a monster lien from a firm I've never worked with before, all because we send marketing information to him all the time.
yeah.
You
You got
know,
it. It's so incredibly important.
you know.
There's no question about it. But then
Mm.
you've got to then think to do it, right? So there was like an old coach. I don't work with a coach at the moment, although I think they're really important and can be very helpful.
Oh, for
And
a law firm? Like I know there's like lawyer business coaches and stuff like that.
No, I mean business coach. I mean,
Yeah.
there's business coaches that focus on law firms, so like a business
Yeah.
coach, not like the legal stuff.
Yeah.
Because most lawyers are not great business people, right? Like and I think with my experience at the old firm managing it, I learned management skills, but that's different than marketing, and it's certainly different than when you're developing your own practice, right? I know you're talking to lots of folks who got their
Yeah.
own firms. They've been at it at different stages of in terms of the amount of years, and the growth is difficult. I look at every employee we bring on as a responsibility, right? Like I don't want to bring someone on just for a month and we'll test it out and see if and that's it. Like I want
Yeah.
people to grow with us. And to me, it's a responsibility. Every move, I always tell people this, like if you bounce around a lot of firms, if you're an attorney, paralegal, like that doesn't look good. So if I have someone come to me, that's another move. I owe it to them to help them succeed, because otherwise that could be a problem for them that I might have created. So I look at it all as a responsibility. And so I find in managing my own practice and growing this firm, like the responsibility is so much greater, clearly. So there's so much that's going on, right? There's the legal work, there's the managing the folks here, there's the decision making on personnel and how to grow it, and then of course there's the marketing. And the marketing is just one piece of it, and we have the marketing that I think works, and social media we haven't focused as much on, but it's important for branding, and we can't do. We're not going to be on TV. Like we're not trying to be that firm. We're not trying to market to the masses. We are just trying to be top of mind. So that's where it becomes important. I don't even know where I was going with that. You said maybe.
No, I understand, because I've been to events. I've gone to Broward trial lawyers events, and I see an attorney that I sent an email to that morning. It says, "You sent me this email. I have a case right now." Like
Yes.
it's one of those things, top of mind, and that's really I think that's where social media and the marketing is beneficial. Is it always, because you'd be surprised. I mean, people that I've worked with, for Christ's sakes, where it's like, damn, I forgot about you. And I've heard stories where attorneys are, but you're an injury attorney, and I'm not saying this has happened to you, but I've heard of this happening to other people in the field, where it's like, okay, your cousin got into a car accident, and he or she calls somebody else who's not a family member, who you don't even know, who, if when you find out, you're like, that guy, you call them, and you're like, hello. And it's like, I got to remind my own family members that I'm a PI, an injury attorney. I work in personal injury. And it's wild to me. I've seen it a lot of times, actually.
Go ahead.
But did you have something? Because I was going to go into go ahead real quick.
No, I was just going to say that, like, relationships, right? Like, I do think social media is important, right? The advertising is important and top of mind, right? Like the brand names, right? If you like Morgan and Morgan, more than half the people that we are taking in as clients have called Morgan and Morgan at the same time.
Yeah.
But I do think that relationship, at the end of the day, I don't care how much you post on social media. If you've got a friendship, right? Like, and this, for me, it's important because a lot of our business comes from other lawyers, right? That's a lot of it. Yeah. You and I have known each other a number of years, right? I consider you a friend. The fact is, despite that friendship, I didn't totally understand what you were doing. So it took some persistence from you for me to really dig in and get it.
Yeah.
I do think that, to me, is still more important. Like, that's why we'll get to the social media, the branding, etc. The relationships that we have with people, as long as they know that they can trust us, that we are going to be attentive to the clients, and then we have the relationship with the clients, that to me is still the most important marketing for us.
Oh, 1,000%. 1,000%. I completely agree with you. You're at Kelly Ustall for almost 10 years. You're the managing attorney or managing partner. I don't know how that was phrased there. Managing partner, managing attorney in the office. When did that decision happen in your mind where you said, I'm gonna, because Ian's your brother-in-law, right?
Yeah.
Ian's your brother-in-law. He's with Golden Gold in Boca.
Yeah.
When did y'all have this day where you said, now? Because you're in a great spot at Kelly Ustall. You're not worrying about having to hire and fire people primarily, typically. You're not doing the HR stuff. Now you got all those things that you got to deal with as well. what was that like? Because that it seemed like there was a few people that decided to make the move almost at the same time from Kelly Ustall and start their own firms, because all of you guys worked for a great firm and you all learned so much, but you also saw the opportunity for yourselves, obviously, naturally. I mean, this is your life. What, when, what, how did this happen?
So yeah, that's a good question. There's one thing you said, Rudy, that was wrong, but that plays a huge role in why I left, right? Which is
Okay.
you said, you weren't hiring, firing, all
Oh,
that.
you're
And
are you doing
because
that too?
I was doing that, right? So
Okay.
I was the managing partner at the old firm, which was actually a really great opportunity, right? It was a great opportunity, like I said, to learn the management side, the administrative side. Um, and I did have to do certain, HR tasks. We had staff there helping, but there were things I had to do that most lawyers weren't doing outside of having their own firm. The What happened for me was I always wanted to have a business I could grow. I was okay with the idea that I could join a business that existed and become part of it. At every job I've ever had, like, gave it 110%. Right? Like, I treated every place I've worked like it was my own, which I think helped. Right? I didn't have an employee mentality. I wasn't task oriented. I was this is my place. I'm gonna do right by the business, the folks who own it, and the clients and whatever. But eventually, I at a firm like where I was, you've got a lot of really bright, motivated people. And when you got that type of these personalities that you need to have to be at a firm like that to work the cases we have, they're also the same type of people who are highly motivated and want to bet on themselves. And so, like, naturally, there comes a point when any one of us had to think, like, all right, like, I want to prove to myself I can do this, right? I can develop my own practice. I can pick and choose what I want to work on. And so what was critical about the thing you mentioned is, for me, I was working on great cases, love the people I work with, amazing opportunity. But there came a point where I was doing the tasks that you would have to do to manage and run a practice, and I wasn't managing and running my own practice. And
Gotcha.
I felt like I wanted to do it. That itch was there. Like, I that and it grew, and it was over a couple of years that it was developing and growing. And I didn't want to do it alone. You're right. There were some other folks who left. Some other folks who left before me had mentioned, "Why don't you come? Let's start a practice together." But it wasn't the right timing for me. Some of the cases that you mentioned earlier, I was working on, and I wanted to see them through. Um, I wasn't set then on leaving. I wanted to see what my path was at that firm. Um, but I never wanted to be totally solo. So I wanted to work with someone. I'm a team player. I played team sports growing up. I play team sports now. I'm not very good, but I tried to keep going with it. And so I want to collaborate. I want to work in that environment. So I knew I wanted to work with somebody. My brother-in-law was at a good firm. He wanted to start his own thing and develop his own practice. I was very fearful of the family thing. Family's way more important than any of what we're
Mhm.
doing. Um, but we've got a good rapport. We're two personalities that are very different, but it
Yeah.
allows us to mesh well. And a part of me, he actually left first. And when he left, there was a part of me that thought, like, all right, there's a number of folks who have started practices who I would be comfortable partnering up with, but you only have so much time to do it. At some point, when they get off the ground, it no longer works. And I
Yeah.
thought I didn't want to get stuck where I'd have to do it solo when I knew I didn't want that. And when he went on his own, he said, you should think about doing this with me. And I had just hit that point where I figured the only fear, my biggest fear, was, where's the cases going to come from, right? Are we going to be able to get the
Mhm.
cases? And I'll have that fear forever. I have it now, even though we got plenty of cases coming in, a ton of work.
Yeah.
But I just hit that point where I wanted to show to myself that I could build my own practice. I could build my own brand and not manage somebody else's. And so the timing was, it just started developing. And the timing was perfect because Ian went out, and we knew we should do this together. And that's why we're brothers in law. That's in two
That's
ways.
there's the marketing thing right there, man.
I know if that's something we've talked about. We got to be that.
Well, that's awesome. That's an awesome story. I mean, because the one thing that that I've there was something I saw from Steve Harvey. Steve Harvey, I think it was. He said something about, and I don't watch him all that much because he gets a little bit extra with stuff. But he says you got to jump,
Yeah,
and you got to jump off the cliff, and you're
yeah,
gonna hit the rocks, and you're gonna get bruised and cut and scraped and the whole nine, and you're gonna have those nights where you're like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this and all that stuff. But if you don't jump, you'll never fly. And when I hear that one thing that guy said, I was always like, it makes a whole lot of sense, because you'll never know what you can do until you actually jump. And you
yeah.
jump, and you guys have been tremendously successful, and I'm very happy for you guys. And
I,
happy anniversary, 3
yeah.
years.
I can tell you, Rudy, I've got a steady state of anxiety at all times. And you told me when
A
I was
steady
thinking,
state
like,
of anxiety.
if you told me that we'd be 3 years in and we will have accomplished what we've accomplished, I mean, we've helped a lot of clients. We've recovered. I mean, last year we recovered over, I think, almost 17 million in recoveries for the clients. We're a small firm. Up until a few months ago, it was just Ian and I. We didn't have a third. I mean, we had staff. We didn't have any other
Yeah.
attorney. We've been a couple of things that when I left, I remember Bob Kelly said to me, I'm wishing you the best of luck. He thought it was he was like excited for me, probably because he had the same feeling once, right? There was a time when he did it, and he said, he goes, the first couple of years are the reason I'm fully gray. And I was like, all right, like that's a challenge I'm willing to accept, and there's truth to it. This has been difficult but rewarding and awesome, right? Like when Tony Quackenbush started his firm, I remember him telling me, like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I
Yeah.
would say this, I think, is the hardest thing I've done, but it doesn't mean it's not working. It's working phenomenally well.
Yeah.
And we've handed, 7-figure recoveries to clients, and it feels amazing. And I've handed $10,000 checks to clients who've given me a hug, and it changes their life. And every one of them helps. And I say that because one of the things that someone told me when I left was, you think you're going to like the work, right? Because I knew I was going to take everything. We take car crash, everything.
Yeah.
And I was like, as long as I'm healthy, as long as the clients I have are happy, I'm going to be happy. And that's been the case. That has been the case all along. Doesn't matter how big a case or how small the case is. We generally have had great clients, and we've been fortunate to be able to help almost all of them exactly as they want. And that's been all we need. That's as rewarding as it gets. So
I mean, you mentioned Bob Kelly, and Bob and John are obviously tremendously respected in the community, in the legal community. But they came from a place. I believe, was it Bob? Like, I don't know
they
if
both
John did, but
they
from
came from
Schlesinger, they both came from Schlesinger. So it's
yeah,
like everything. It's like in Palm Beach, everything's derived out of Lessler and Searcy, and it all trickles down from there. And Lido Ryder, and like Lido Ryder created Smith, maybe Smith Ball Baez,
yep.
Prather, and Clark. Like they all came from like the same tree. And so the Schlesinger tree is Broward County. And then if you're Bob Kelly and John Usto, I'm sure you're sad to see great people like you and Eric and Josiah and Kim and Tony and you guys leave. But they also I have to look back and like, I'm the dad.
They should. I
Like
mean,
there has to be like a level of pride that they honed their skills here,
yeah.
and they're tremendously successful on their own. I mean, I would feel that way at the very least. It's like it's like the coaching trees in football,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. And it's amazing how you see, like, as it trickles down where everyone comes
Yeah.
from. I would look. I would be proud. I mean, I like to tell. I had lunch yesterday with an attorney who just started her practice in April, and I told her, "You call me anytime. Anything you need, like, call me." But I find it rewarding to help other attorneys. I've got most of the attorneys that left Kelly Ustal, I'm talking to them all the time, right? Like Josiah and I were talking earlier today about a couple cases, just running through things. So I want to help anyone I can. But that wanting, right? The fact that I want to do that is the same reason that I would be very proud if I had people under me flourish. So I'm assuming that they recognize the success that they've had, putting aside cases and whatnot, just in the folks that are now out there. And everyone we just mentioned, Josiah, Eric, Tony, Kim, Todd McFarland. I have, in the last 3 years with our practice, have worked on cases with every one of them, whether it's a conflict case. Todd McFarland and I got a case right now. He's got one, I got another. I got another. Eric and I work on cases all the time. Josiah and I have co-counseled numerous. The not only is every one of these folks thriving and they're doing incredible work, but we're all collaborating together, and there's the relationships that were built are amazing. And so I work with I talk to every one of these people every week. I'm talking to them, some of them every day, and it's a pretty amazing thing to have that.
That's awesome. So you're the Broward County trial lawyer president right now. I know that's another job, another job for you. How, when did you decide that that's something that you wanted to do as well? I mean, because it is a task to be on these boards, on these, lead these organizations, and now you're the president. So now that's another duty that you have.
So I don't know when I decided to do it. But there's something I said at the judges' night when I got sworn in that I genuinely believe. Right, the same way I learned I want to do plaintiff's work by having worked for insurance companies. Again, I wasn't doing defense, but I was working on the side of power, and it just felt like that was the wrong side for me. I find it cool. I find it exciting that as like the little guy, right? We're all the small firms. We represent the individuals. I always thought it was awesome that we have to collaborate in order to succeed. Like I said, I'm like a team. I like to be on a team. And when I started at the old firm, I went to an event for an organization that's nationwide that just is products lawyers. And the whole purpose of the organization is for the lawyers to be able to come together and collaborate. Because the truth is, you go against a Ford or General Motors or any big box store. The reality is they have all the resources. So the only way we succeed is by collaborating and working together. So the plaintiffs' bar associations, I thought, were really important because they serve what I think is the most important purpose for plaintiffs' lawyers, which is we've got to work together as a group. FJA serves an incredible purpose. As a group, we all come together and we have a lobbying arm. And the truth is, it's so beyond necessary because the state legislature is always doing things against us. They're always trying to take away the ability for individuals to get justice. And so as one attorney alone can't do it. As an organization, we can. On the local level, it's the same thing. As an organization, we can accomplish way more than each individually. And so many of the folks on the executive board, on the board, and just members, I have turned to for advice. I mean, we've got Ian and I are working on a really horrible death case right now that involves Asana, and there's a complicated liability issue. And there's someone in Broward who a number of years ago had a somewhat similar case, and he immediately was ready to go help us. Right? There's no competition. He wants to help. And so I think the mission, one of the missions of the BCTLA, is for us as a collective unit to help preserve justice and get justice for the community. And so I really believe in that. And so it's an honor to be a part of it and now be able to lead it for the year. Although granted, leading it is a job, but Jody is amazing. I got Kim Wald is the next in line, and she's awesome in helping out. So there's all sorts of help there.
I mean, I gave Kim my recommendation that she should have her wedding at the gala, so she has all the lawyers there to cut her a check, so she can go on a really nice honeymoon for like $100,000. But she declined that idea.
She figured that having a wedding with a bunch of lawyers is not necessarily the most fun. And I agree with her.
But that's awesome, and I Synergy, we are a proud sponsor of the BCTLA, and I'm greatly appreciative for everything that you guys do over there. And Jody is absolutely awesome. But Michael, tell people where they can find you. I mean, release your social media.
All right, fine. We are. They could find us at our Instagram, Facebook, HK Injury Law. Right, Hersh Kurtman. So HK Injury Law. We've got 561-208-3700 is our number. We're here, happy to help anyone anytime. HK Injury Law. HKinjurylaw.com. Our website got all sorts of information on who we are, what we've done, and anyone can email me. Michael at HK Injury Law. I mean, we're around. Like I said, I'm happy to help any attorney. I'll talk to clients about any questions they need, even if it's not a case I'm on yet. I just want to help people, and that will lead to business. So
I thank you. This will all be in the description of the video. Michael, I thank you so much for jumping on with me. You're a VIP. You're a presidente, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate everything you do for everyone, and the BCTLA and myself, and the business that we share and the friendship that we share. So thank you so much for jumping on. I have a legal legend here, Michael Hersh. Thank you again. We will see you all real soon with the next episode of Legal Legends Podcast. But again, Michael Hersh, legal legend, baby. Take care.
thanks, Rudy.